And whenever you're ready, Commissioner.
Sure. Yeah. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much to all the members of the advisory committee here for your ongoing willingness to serve. Really appreciate it. Our current committee chair, Senator Brenner, is unfortunately unable to join us today as the legislative session, as you might imagine, is in full swing. So that's why I'm kicking us off here today. And for the sake of any public members who might be joining us, my name is Amanda Beal. I'm the Commissioner of the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, which is the home of the PFAS Fund. And I also just want to note that if public members want to provide any comments or thoughts, we'll have a designated time for that later in the agenda. So for the meantime, if you can just stay muted and in listening mode, we would really appreciate that. I also have to offer my apologies as I'm going to need to leave our meeting early as we are on a time crunch to compile some essential information for the ACF committee, our legislative committee, so that they can complete their review of our biennial budget requests. But Deputy Commissioner Nancy McBrady is going to be joining us soon, and she will help to move us through the remainder of the agenda. And with that said, on the front end of this meeting, I just want to note that our work really does continue to be recognized nationally as leading on PFAS. And, it's really incredible to be able to talk to people and show that we are demonstrating that there's so much we can do to support farmers impacted by PFAS contamination. I was in DC last week, and I had an opportunity to meet with and speak with members of our congressional delegation, as well as staff and members of House and Senate Ag committees, both majority and minority. And I made sure to highlight Maine's dedication to this issue, and they were very appreciative to get updates on what we've been doing. And I think we really are showing that there is hope. We can help farmers, and we're again just leading the way on that. I also want to note that addressing PFAS in agriculture also remains one of the top policy priorities of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, which I serve currently as the board vice president. So that's just a snapshot of how relevant this work is, and at the federal level, at the national level. And again, I just want to express my appreciation to our staff and to everyone on this committee for all the great work that you're doing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Beth. And I think we have some presentations and discussion to be had.
Yes, should we ask committee members to introduce themselves?
That's a great idea.
Okay. I will call you in the order you appear on my screen. So Adrian.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Lee from New Beet Farm in Knox, Maine. I serve as a representative of agriculture on this committee.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Lucia Brown. I am the Deputy State Executive Director for the Farm Service Agency in Maine. I'm a fairly new appointee, but glad to be here and participating.
Thank you, Lucia. Diane?
Good morning. I'm Diane Rowland. I'm the Dean of the College of Earth, Life, and Health Sciences and Director of the Maine Agricultural and Forest Experiment Station at the University of Maine.
Jim?
Hello, I'm Jim Buckle from the Buckle Farm in Unity, Maine, and I, with Adrian, represent agriculture on the committee.
Thank you. Becca?
Good morning, everyone. Becca Bolus, Executive Director at Maine Public Health Association, public health person on the committee.
And Isaac, could you turn your camera on for a moment? Dr. Isaac Benowitz will be speaking later today.
Hi, I'm Isaac Benowitz. I'm Maine CDC's Chief Medical Officer and the State Epidemiologist. Thank you.
Thanks. So I will go ahead and share my screen. I hope. Okay, so can you all see that now? So we've had our welcome. I will be providing some updates on the status of the different elements of the PFAS fund. And then the bulk of the meeting is going to be a discussion of reallocating some funding away from a clinical trial and towards publishing treatment protocols. And Dr. Benowitz will help lead that conversation. And then at the end of the meeting, we will have an opportunity for public comment. So, there are 4 primary elements to the PFAS fund. There's financial assistance, research, land, and health. Under the umbrella of financial assistance, over the past year, the fund has distributed about $2.35 million. The vast majority of this has been income replacement payments, followed by administrative cost grants, business planning, and other professional services, such as marketing to help a producer expand new markets necessitated by the presence of PFAS. That total also includes funding for the Navigators program at University of Maine Cooperative Extension. These are the folks that can work with producers to help identify programs and resources that they're eligible for, and then to work through the application process for those. On the land front, our big news is that we closed on our first property last week on February 24th. It is a 108-acre property in Waldo County. The purchase price was $333,000. About 75% of the property is forested, 25% is field. That field is mostly classified as prime farmland, with a portion being farmland of statewide importance. The contamination levels are moderate, about 22 parts per billion PFAS in the soil, meaning that, and this property historically was used to grow hay. With that level of PFAS in the soil, the hay grown on this property should not be the sole source of feed for a grass-based dairy, but it's likely that other products can be grown on this property. For example, corn, especially if that corn is mixed with other feed sources. We, meaning myself and Melissa Hamlin, who's responsible for the land acquisition and stewardship component of the PFAS fund, have had initial conversations with the Maine Forest Service about potentially having them manage the forested portion as a demonstration forest that they could use to educate woodlot owners. And then the intention for the field is to maintain it as open field for agricultural use. At the moment, the PFAS fund lacks the authority to lease land, so that's part of that bill, that LD 130, that the ACF committee of the legislature heard yesterday. We're optimistic that we will be granted the authority to lease, and also that the proceeds from both lease and sales will be directed back into the PFAS fund. The next step for this property is to work with DEP to enroll it in the department's voluntary response action program. That will entail identifying restrictions on the property, restrictions on the use of the property, and recording those restrictions in the Waldo County Registry of Deeds. We have 2 other properties that are sort of in the pipeline, and we expect to enter into purchase and sale agreements on those properties in the next, month or so. Now that we are property owners, we are grappling with the question of payments in lieu of taxes. The state, of course, does not pay property tax. It's prohibited both by the state constitution and statute. But pilots are payments made by tax-exempt organizations to municipalities to help cover the cost of municipal services like police, fire, road. Whether to pay pilots is a policy choice. It's a choice that the fund has decided we want to do. The implementation plan recommends pilots to mitigate local impacts of land acquisitions, and under Fund Rule Chapter 405, payments of pilots are allowed. So we're now grappling with how to make those payments. Implementation of pilots is also a policy choice. They're voluntary. Some municipalities may not request one. The fund needs to develop an approach for payments on a rational basis. And I also need to point out that the PFAS fund is not in a position to make payments in perpetuity because we have a finite amount of funds. So to the extent that we can, the department does want to return these properties to agricultural production, which may mean that we sell the properties to a agricultural producer in the future, in which case there wouldn't be a need for a pilot because the property would be back in private ownership. But for the duration that the department does hold these properties, we need to come up with a method for determining how to make those payments. So we met with the land advisory panel last week. We talked through what to base the amount on. Could it be equal to the property tax, some percentage of the property tax based on current use, a flat rate. We also talked about frequency of payments, whether it be a one-time payment annually on some other cadence, like every 2 or 3 years. The leaning after that meeting was to ask assessors to calculate the amounts that would be paid under either the farmland or open space tax law. We wouldn't actually be enrolling the property in those programs because, again, the state is not a taxpayer, but we would use that figure to determine the amount paid to the municipality. So I guess with that, do committee members have any comments, any feedback on our approach to payments in lieu of taxes? Okay.
Oh,
Not
sorry,
here.
I was waiting. I was sorry. I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand.
Sorry.
I'm not very good at that. I think it is important that we factor in payments in lieu of taxes, especially thinking about the impacts on kind of regional bases and how like this could potentially have an outsized impact on specific communities. But just yeah, I am curious any further discussion that happened in the land committee as far as understanding that we have a finite amount of money and the intention of where that money is going, just if there does need to be some, yeah, yeah, I'm kind of curious. I just would flag and agree that we would need to be strategic on like an amount that we can feel comfortable allocating towards that over time. So yeah, that's my only comment. Just saying that we should really be thoughtful on like that could be a significant amount of money over time if we're not careful about it for the fund.
Right. Yeah. And in these early years, we have the funds. We don't have a lot of properties in the pipeline, but you're right. You raised 2 important points. One, we need to be thinking long-term if we're going to hold these properties. And also there will be certain communities that there'll be an outsized impact, and we want to protect those communities to the extent possible, and because there is much, they're harmed as much as the individual producer. Any other thoughts? Okay, I will move on. So you all know the intention of the research program is to support, facilitate, and share research that helps farmers determine the best options for maintaining, enhancing viability despite the presence of PFAS on their property. Maddie Bruno, who she has moved on to DEP. She's taken a hydrogeologist position there. It's a good professional move for her, but I'm really sad to see her go. She did a fantastic job setting up the major grants program. So we're in our first round of funding. We have all the proposals in. They've been shared with our peer reviewers. The peer reviewers will be getting their reports back to me next Monday. And we hope to announce the awards in April-ish. These funds, these grants are intended to be funded with a grant from USDA. At this point, I don't have any indication that that money will not be forthcoming, but we've all seen the news. That could change. And if it does, we have sufficient funding within the PFAS fund that we will be able to support this first round of grants on our expected timeline. Also coming in 2025, so for the vacant position, we've advertised, we have a pool of candidates we're interviewing next week. So I'm optimistic we'll get somebody on board in the not too distant future. One of that individual's first tasks is going to be developing this targeted grants program, which is really going to emphasize collaboration with farmers. These will be smaller dollar value awards, maybe shorter duration, but like I said, really with an emphasis on research conducted in collaboration with farmers. Moving on to the health realm, both the plan and the fund's rules call for a mental health support program. We conducted a survey in January of 2023 of impacted farmers that have been working with the department, as well as community members from the Fairfield area, asking what sort of services would be attractive to them. That's where this list came from: the supportive counseling, peer support, wellness and related trainings, web-based resources. We're contracted with Farm First, an organization out of Vermont that runs an EAP program, an employee assistance program that provides these sorts of services to the agricultural community within Vermont. So they're consulting for us to help design a program that addresses these bullet points. They have been having conversations with different organizations within Maine, identifying what services are presently available, what the gaps are, and they'll be presenting a report to the department with recommendations for how to fill those gaps. So that process is underway. And then physical health. The PFAS Fund is establishing a blood testing program. I am about a week away from initiating the contracting process to contract with all willing and able laboratories that are able to test human blood serum for a specified array of PFAS analytes. The idea is that, let me back up a step. So in addition to the contracting with the labs, I'm developing a list of potentially eligible addresses. So DEP, they are doing their LD 1600 study. They're collecting samples of water and soil for addresses where soil exceeds the residential remedial action guideline for PFAS, PFOS, or their water exceeds 20 parts per trillion of the sum of 6 PFAS compounds. Those addresses are eligible for testing. They don't have to be farms. They can be non-farm residents as long as they meet those thresholds. But DEP isn't collecting information about who lives at these addresses. They might have one contact person. They might just list resident in their database. So I'm preparing a mailing to all of these addresses identified through DEP testing, as well as testing at DACF. This mailing is going to go out informing people that because of their test results, they're potentially eligible for testing. I need those people to respond to me. I'm hoping to set up either an online portal to give people the option of responding either through the portal or sending me a physical letter back, identifying who presently lives there and who has lived there over the 10 years prior to the discovery of PFAS. So these people will all presumptively be eligible for blood testing. Once they are, once the system is up and running, folks will go to their primary care physician, have a conversation about whether blood testing makes sense for their particular situation. The physician will order the test. The patient will go have their blood drawn. Results will be returned to the physician. DACF is not getting anybody's blood test results. I want to be very clear. Medical information is not going to be shared with the department. The laboratory will bill the individual's insurance first. If there's a balance, that will be billed to DACF PFAS fund. We will pay that balance up to a set threshold. There'll be no cost for eligible individuals for this testing. So related to that, Maine CDC is in the process of rulemaking to make PFAS blood test results a notifiable condition, much like childhood lead test results are reportable. And that allows the toxicologists at CDC to follow up with individuals with elevated levels to try to identify, what can be done to reduce exposure and, make other recommendations. CDC is developing educational resources, both for the clinicians and the public, so that both sides of that conversation at the clinician's office know what they're asking for, how to interpret results, what sort of follow-on testing might be warranted given, a particular test result. So that's ongoing at CDC. CDC is also undertaking a farmer and farm worker soil exposure study to try to identify the degree of concern we should have about soil exposure, either through inhalation, accidental ingestion, or through the skin. And then the last thing, well, not the last thing, because CDC is doing a ton beyond just what is listed here, of course, but as relates to the PFAS fund, CDC is exploring treatment options to reduce PFAS levels in people. And let me give some background for how we arrived at that particular task for CDC. So under the PFAS fund statute, which was approved in April of 2022, the PFAS fund can be used to provide medical care for persons found to have blood levels greater than that of the general population. DACF PFAS fund is also authorized under statute to develop criteria for funding medical monitoring and healthcare for persons found to have blood levels of PFAS greater than the general population, and when it is medically relevant to undergo periodic medical examination and healthcare. So these were sort of the marching orders for the advisory committee, and then more specifically for the health subcommittee when we were in the planning phase of the PFAS fund. So using the statute sort of as our guidance, the PFAS fund implementation plan, which was approved in July of 2023, included this statement: that paying for treatment to remove PFAS from blood would be an appropriate use of the fund if there were any treatments approved for mainstream use. At that time, though, there weren't any approved treatments. So the plan reads, in the absence of approved treatments, the PFAS fund could support a clinical trial to help advance the science of PFAS reduction modalities. Well, now, a year and a half on, there have been developments in the field of medical treatment. And I won't go into this in any detail because Dr. Benowitz is far more expert at this than I am. I'll just say that there has been a clinical trial of a cholesterol lowering medication that also showed a substantial decrease in PFAS in individuals who took this drug. And also 2 hospitals in Maine have approved protocols for administering cholestyramine, this cholesterol drug, for both adults and children. And I guess with that, I will stop sharing. And Isaac, if you want to start sharing and take it from here.
Great. Thanks so much, Beth. Let me just take a moment to get some, Need to get some slides up on the screen if you give me permission.
Yep.
Great. Mm. Beth, can you give me a thumbs up when that's showing up on your screen?
Yep, good.
Great. All right, so good morning, everyone. I'm Isaac Benowitz. I'm the Chief Medical Officer and State Epidemiologist at Maine CDC, the State Health Department, and I co-chaired the PFAS Fund's Health Subcommittee. So I'm coming back to you here to share some updates and perspectives and recommendations on how we can move forward with with the best information for patients about how they can lower PFAS in their bodies. So here's where we were 2 years ago. When we wrapped up the health subcommittee recommendations to the fund, there was pretty limited published scientific literature on medical interventions to reduce PFAS body burden. There was one study which looked at phlebotomy, the removal of blood from the body, and the results were not really that impressive. And we thought at the time that it would be a good idea to use resources from the fund to support a randomized clinical trial to expand the literature by studying one or more interventions in a group of people in Maine who were highly exposed to PFAS. Additional studies examining potential interventions to reduce PFAS body burden have been published since then and show a more promising result. And in particular, as Beth noted, cholestyramine, which is a commonly used medication that reduces cholesterol levels, has shown a lot of promise and gotten a lot more attention, in part due to this clinical trial that showed a substantial decrease in several key PFAS chemicals in blood. There are two clinicians in Maine who are really leading a charge, and both have gone through all the hoops at their institutions to develop and pursue approval to use treatment protocols that use cholestyramine to lower the PFAS total body burden. One of them is a family medicine physician at Reddington Fairview General Hospital in Skowhegan, and the other is a pediatrician at Maine Medical Center in Portland. I want to point to another place on the planet that has seen a lot of PFAS exposure and has really taken a deep dive into how some of these treatments could be helpful. So in the UK, in Jersey, past use of AFFF for firefighting at an airport led to the local government bringing together an international panel of scientists to provide advice on potential interventions to reduce PFAS body burden. They conducted a literature review and also a cost effectiveness analysis. The literature review found that the cholesterol lowering medication, cholestyramine, showed the largest effect compared to other treatments. And the cost effectiveness analysis lined up with that, finding that the same medication group was around 30% more cost effective. Here at Maine CDC, we're certainly watching this work closely. This is just a summary table that takes a close look at the reduction in different PFAS compounds based on different modalities and shows that cholestyramine and similar medications are one of the best options. And so we're proposing to use the allocated $200,000 to do two things. The first is to provide support to the two clinicians that I mentioned earlier so they can improve their treatment protocols and make those protocols and indirectly make cholestyramine more available to all Maine clinicians for all patients that have high levels of PFAS in blood. And second is to support those same clinicians to write up their experiences in a case series article that adds to the scientific literature and documents the effectiveness of treatment and its potential for future use with a focus on people in Maine. And I'm going to take my slides down and I'm happy to answer questions. And I've got several members of the Maine CDC team here with me as well.
Thank you, Isaac. I was remiss in not explaining before you spoke that DICF currently has a memorandum of understanding with CDC to do the work on my last slide, kind of that bulleted list of work CDC is doing. And part of that MOU is $200,000 to initiate a clinical trial. And what we're asking for is the advisory committee's input on reallocating that $200,000 towards the work that Isaac just described. So just wanted to be clear about that. Go ahead, Becca.
So are you looking for feedback from us on if we think this is a good idea to support the research, or what kind of, this is incredible. I'm so excited about these findings. So if you care, if that's what you're looking for, I think
Yep.
this is a great use of that funding. I'm just really excited about these findings. I think that's awesome. Thanks, Isaac, for that overview.
Yes, that's exactly what we're asking for, is whether, given the changes that have occurred since 2023, these advances in medical knowledge, in evidence of the efficacy of cholestyramine, do we want to redirect the funds that had been set aside for a clinical trial towards the further dissemination of information about cholestyramine? Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, I still can't figure out how to raise my hand on this, but yeah, I just would echo, I think this is a great use of these funds, and fully support using this money for that as well.
Thank you. So can we hear from each? Oh, in the chat, Dr. Smith shared the link to the published clinical trial. Can I hear from the other committee members? Diane?
Yes, I support this change. I think this is great news.
Excellent.
I agree as well. I think it's a great change and a really good idea.
Okay. Lucia?
I support the change as well. This is really interesting and good information.
Excellent. Nancy?
On behalf of Commissioner Beal, yes, so very supportive of this approach, and very happy that this is proving to be so hopefully viable. Look forward to the progress that this will make.
Excellent. I think, did I miss any committee members? All right. Are there any members of the public who want to comment first on cholestyramine, and then we can open it up to other questions? Um, so I see in the chat, Elizabeth Goodwin has asked, what are your thoughts about maybe collaborating with the Red Cross and adding a screening for donors? I don't know. Dr. Smith or Dr. Benowitz, do you want to take that?
Maybe I could ask the person who wrote in with that question to clarify what they were thinking that would accomplish.
Hey, good morning, all. Thanks for hosting this. I'm Beth Goodwin. I'm here representing Maine State Beekeepers, and we had written a letter of support for one of the grant proposals. But I think this is a terrific conversation. Thanks very much for having it. And as a regular, and specific to my question there, as a regular blood donor, when you go in for donation, they test for all sorts of things in your blood. And so if this is, it just occurred to me that this might be another way to collect information.
Elizabeth, I think what I would add, I'm Andy Smith. I'm the state toxicologist at CDC. And if you're thinking about just understanding people's exposure to PFAS, and current blood levels, we actually have a national data system for that. It's called NHANES, National Biomonitoring, and that's been tracking PFAS levels in blood for the US population really back to 1999, 2000. So we sort of look at that as kind of our key data set for tracking what's happening from a sort of general US population point of view of exposure. And it's been interesting if you go back in 1999, 2000, the average blood level of PFAS, for example, in the US population was 30 part per billion. It's now down to about 4. And that's largely due to, we think, getting it out of food packaging products, because how well things change that quickly. We don't exactly get rid of our furniture and our jackets and things like that quickly. So if that's what you're getting at, I think we have a good data source for that. These tests right now, unfortunately, they are not just expensive, but they take a while. So trying to do that within someone who's going to, it would have to be a retrospective sort of thing if we were going to analyze it. And the question would be whether you're getting any information above and beyond what we get out of the NHANES. So that helps.
Adrian?
I do think that this is a good use of the fund. One question I do have is my understanding of how cholestyramine is working right now is that it is more effective on reducing certain types of PFAS. And just, I guess I'm curious, as far as the amount that we have allocated for this in the fund and the proposal to use all of it for the cholestyramine, the work related to that trial. Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of curious. I don't really have a very good concept of costs and money, and like if that basically is like, is that going to address the broader needs of like all, like, yeah, is it, I know it seems like a very useful treatment, but just kind of curious about how it may or may not have benefit the broader group of folks that have high levels of PFAS in their body. I guess it's a question probably more specifically for Isaac, I would imagine, but
Yeah,
or
so
Andy.
I see Andy's hand up as well. So I'll say a little bit and then hand it over to Andy. So cholestyramine is widely available, works pretty well for reducing at least some PFAS, probably several of them in different levels or to different degree. The gap is that clinicians don't know that that's what you do if someone who is concerned about PFAS and has a high PFAS blood level is looking to reduce it faster or doesn't even know that there is an option to. And so the way to fill that is to increase general knowledge in the medical community about how these medications work and to produce high quality information that can be shared with the broader clinical community that helps them understand that there is something and that this is how you use it. And so the goal is really to put this money towards helping a very, very small number of clinicians in the state who are comfortable using cholestyramine to advance their work to the point where it can serve as an educational resource and even really sort of an implementation resource for other clinicians in the state. Andy, do you want to, I know you've been talking directly with the two clinicians and probably have a better idea of, what exactly $200,000 translates into in terms of activities.
Or I think if it's okay, I'll respond, I think, more directly to Adrian's question, which is, good read on you that paper does indicate that you're far more successful with rapid reduction in PFAS than you are with PFOA, for example. And we do see a fair amount of PFOA. In fact, it's probably more common than PFAS in well water. So it's a good question, but it's still like a 25% reduction from a 12-week in trial, so, or treatment. So that's still a pretty significant reduction. And I think the two investigators are really paying attention to that. I think, and Beth can correct me if I'm wrong, there are two pots of money here. There's the 200,000, which is really for Maine CDC to go out and identify what sort of study makes sense to do and get the design for that. So then an RFP could go out to support a study to actually do it. There's 500,000 set aside for that. So we're just talking about that front 200,000 and saying we don't think we need to go out and find another to design a study right now. We have good information to act on, and it's really about making that treatment available. However, we will continue to monitor the literature, as will the providers we're interested in working with. And it's quite possible other things will come out. And if they are, we can respond to those. So I think right now it's about acting, given that we now have information on a treatment that looks fairly effective and can be used. But that does not keep us from not paying attention to the literature in any way and look for things that will work better. So that's kind of, I think, does that all make sense with you too? So,
Yeah, thank you.
sure.
Okay, any other questions? Diane?
I guess just to build on Adrian's question then, Andy, you're saying if other compounds are identified, we do have a portion of the fund that could also be used to test those additional possible treatments?
Test or just respond in the same way we are now, of making people aware of them. Because I mean, the providers are highly motivated. They're going to be keeping the idea. If there's better treatments out there, they're going to be motivated to try to implement those treatments as well. And the question is, how can we best support that? So I think what we're seeing internationally is there's interest, be given the communities that have high exposures from lots of reasons, to find ways to accelerate elimination from their bodies. So it's, you can see there's that work going on in Jersey, in the UK, there's been work done in Australia. So it is kind of an international type sort of area of interest and study. So we can expect more to be coming out of these sort of gold standard studies, which are clinical trials. And hopefully we can continue to learn and respond to those as they come out. How that plays into when and how we use that 500,000, I would defer to Beth on, but it is there and a possibility to help if we need it.
Yeah, and I would just add the intention of the clinical trial was to support access to treatment. And we thought we had to start at the very beginning and figure out what the treatment was. But now, because of work done elsewhere, we know of one promising mode of treatment. And so I think we will continue to look for, not, the royal we, will continue to look for approaches to meet the same goal, which is to providing access to treatment. And conceivably, if other medications, treatment methods are identified, we could direct some financial support towards access to those other modalities. Well, hearing nothing further, the fund will work with CDC to redirect the funds towards the publication of these protocols and case series, and help to further educate the Maine medical community and even beyond the borders of Maine about this treatment. The mechanism will likely be a sole source contract from CDC to the clinicians. And with that, this meeting comes to an end. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.